Rain gathers in the wheel ruts of an abandoned Roman road. Beyond the ditch, the stone walls of a fort still stand, but no sentry watches from the gate. Roof tiles have slipped from the barracks. Nettles grow through the bathhouse floor. A milestone names an emperor whose officials no longer collect taxes here. Britain has not vanished. Rome has. During the early 5th century, imperial government in Britain came apart. Troops were drawn away for wars on the continent. Coinage disappeared from ordinary use. Town councils lost the money and authority needed to maintain roads, walls, and granaries. The year 410 is often used as the dividing line, though collapse rarely arrives on a single morning. The people left behind still lived among Roman things. Farmers worked old field boundaries. Christian priests read Latin. Families sheltered inside forts or stripped stone from villas for new houses. Roads remained useful after the government that built them was gone. In some places, Roman habits endured for decades. In others, timber halls, hilltop settlements, and local warbands replaced the institutions of the province. Power became personal. A ruler needed grain, cattle, horses, armed followers, and a defensible place. He might call himself king. He might claim Roman ancestry, a tribal pedigree, or the blessing of the church. Across western and northern Britain, small kingdoms took shape. Dumnonia in the southwest, kingdoms in Wales, Reged in the north, and Strathclyde around the Clyde. Their frontiers moved constantly. British rulers fought one another, married one another, and sometimes hired foreign warriors against their neighbours. Across the North Sea, Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and other peoples were already familiar with Britain. Some had served Rome as soldiers. After imperial authority weakened, larger groups crossed with families, livestock, weapons, and the intention to stay. The British cleric Gildas, writing in the 6th century, described a ruler who invited Saxon mercenaries to defend the island. The newcomers demanded more supplies, rebelled, and spread fire through the land. Gildas was a preacher explaining disaster as punishment for the sins of British kings, not a neutral historian. Yet the world behind his anger is recognizable. Frightened communities, rival rulers, burned settlements, and leaders trying to purchase security with men they could not control. The struggle lasted for generations. There was no clean line with Britons on one side and Saxons on the other. Alliances crossed language and ancestry. A Germanic warrior might serve a British king. A Briton might enter an English household or fight against another British kingdom. Raiding, tribute, marriage, migration, and settlement all belong to the same frontier. At some point, probably around the end of the 5th century or beginning of the 6th, the Britons won a major victory at a place called Mount Badon. Gildas remembered Badon as the battle that brought a measure of peace. He did not name the commander. That silence is where Arthur enters. The earliest surviving text to name him is the Historia Brittonum, compiled in Wales around 829. Its Arthur is not the king of Camelot. He is a battle leader who fights alongside the kings of Britain. The text gives him 12 victories near rivers, forests, forts, and hills. At Badon, he carries a Christian image and kills an impossible number of enemies. The list may preserve old traditions, combine several campaigns, or gather victories once attributed to different men. If a real Arthur stood behind it, his world contained no plate armor, stone castles, or tournament fields. He would have worn wool, leather, mail if he was wealthy, and a cloak fastened with a brooch. His army would have been a mounted household surrounded by farmers called to war. They moved along cracked Roman roads and depended on cattle, stored grain, local guides, and the loyalty of men who could leave at any time. Later, Welsh annals connected Arthur with Badon and with a final battle at Camelot, where Arthur and Medrawd fell. They did not explain whether the two men were enemies, relatives, or commanders on the same side. The familiar story came much later. In the 12th century, Geoffrey of Monmouth turned Arthur into a conquering monarch. French poets added Lancelot, courtly love, the Round Table, and the Grail. Merlin grew from older Welsh traditions into the king's prophet. Camelot became a court where medieval writers could examine loyalty, adultery, kingship, and betrayal. Archaeology has made the Briton beneath the romance easier to see. Excavations at Tintagel in Cornwall uncovered substantial 5th and 6th century buildings, imported Mediterranean wine jars, and fine glass. In 2018, English Heritage announced a 7th century slate ledge scratched with Latin words, Greek letters, Christian symbols, and personal names. The headland belonged to a wealthy, literate, Christian network tied by sea to Western Europe and the Mediterranean. A 2024 reassessment of the Thetford treasure pushed the burial of its gold jewellery and silver spoons into the 420s or 430s. If the new dating is right, elite Roman-style wealth was still being made and hidden after the traditional end of Roman Britain. The old order faded unevenly. Genetics has complicated the other side of the story. A major 2022 Nature study examined hundreds of early medieval genomes, including 278 people buried in England. It found large-scale migration from northern continental Europe, especially into eastern England. Whole communities crossed the sea. The same study found mixed families and strong regional differences. Continental ancestry was highest in the east and lower toward the west. The formation of England involved migration, intermarriage, adoption, and local people entering new kingdoms. Arthur remains harder to recover. In 2025, historical linguist Bernard Meese argued that language preserved in Welsh annal entries may point back to 6th century records, and therefore to a real Arthur. Other scholars remain unconvinced. They emphasise that Gildas, our nearest substantial British source, never names him, and that Arthur appears clearly only in a 9th century text, shaped by the needs of its own age. A British commander may have helped win Badon. His name may have been Arthur. The surviving evidence cannot prove it. But the world that required such a figure was real. Roman walls with no garrison, churches keeping Latin alive, ships bringing wine to Cornish cliffs, migrant families landing in the east, and British rulers gathering men beneath old standards before another kingdom took the road ahead.